what I suggest for anybody who thinks this is a win-lose situation, make sure you know it doesn't have to be, and it's not. I think that's what scares us, that someone's got to lose. But negotiations do often start at no. And then you get to stay curious and open and continue a conversation by saying, well, what would make it a yes?
Hey, I'm Tanya Bhattacharya, and you are listening to the Campfire Circle podcast. We are all about breaking down the boardroom table as the ultimate space of leadership, and instead replacing it with a campfire. Because that's where we share our stories. That's where we build warm community, and that is where there's always room. I'm building an impactful business in public through thought leadership, and I'm taking you behind the scenes all along the way. So if you want to stand out as you stand up for your mission, you are in the right place. Hey, everybody. I'm here with Nadia De Ala, leadership and negotiation coach for women of color, a self-advocacy advocate, and the proud daughter of Filipino immigrants. Nadia, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to the Campfire Circle.
Thank you so much. I love campfire circles in general, so this is fun. I'm already excited.
Totally. Me too. And I just have to say, this is an audio podcast, so the good people listening can't see us right now, but I just want everyone to know that we are wearing the same Farm Rio petite leopard print jumpsuit right now. And I just want you to really enjoy that information. I hope it creates a vibe for you as you listen.
We found out on accident on the online streets and both said we're going to wear it. And we committed to that and did. And this is our first time meeting. So I love that.
It's such a treat. Such a treat. Nadia, I've been wanting to really explore this topic for a long, long time around like negotiation for the increasing opportunities we get as we grow our visibility. But I knew I couldn't be the one to talk about it because this is something that I struggle with myself. And so I popped over to LinkedIn, I typed in negotiation coach, and you were the first person to pop up looking fly as hell, might I add. And through this conversation and through this connection, we have found out that we have so many beautiful mutual friends in common, like Shay and Allison, and probably a lot of other really good humans. So I'm just so glad to be brought together with you and start to explore this together.
Yeah, I love that. That feels good to be the first thing that popped up when you typed in negotiation coach or anything like that. So I appreciate knowing more about how we got connected. And yeah, the universe brought us together, it seems.
That's it. The universe is in our favor. The algorithm was in our favor. All the good things. All the good things. So I'd love for you to tell me what you have grown through to become the guide that you are today, the negotiation guide.
That is such a fun question, the way you phrased it, because there is so much growth to get to claim who you are and the expertise that you do. And so what I've grown through are multiple careers in my own life. I've grown through daring to change my path, daring to say it wasn't a waste of time for me to go from this industry to this industry to this industry. Grown through the fear of quitting my job without another job. So I studied audio engineering, sound recording, went into full-time hospitality, went to travel tech, went to startup tech, and eventually quit after helping grow a team for my last company as their first account manager, and decided to take a break to heal because I realized I had just been bopping around and it was unfulfilling work. And it was a huge growth of just because you can doesn't mean you should moment over and over again. That I think this happens a lot with my clients where we just go with the flow and say, oh, I'm really good at that. Oh, I can do that. Oh, there's good perks and benefits to this job and this company and this industry, and not really taking the time to think, what do I want to do? What do I want to make or create in this world? What impact do I have? So I feel like I'm speaking very poetically, but really returning back to myself is part of a huge growth of saying, I am the guide for people to keep it real with themselves, with the relationships they have, with the stakeholders they have, with the work that they do internally and externally. I do that work right? I lead with love, I lead with integrity. And even right now, I'm in a season of growth to reconnect with those values and break cycles that don't serve me in a different way. And when I found coaching, I was on a career sabbatical. In June 2017, I quit my 6-figure tech job, was super unhappy doing sales. So I've grown from that. And I didn't know that I would become a coach. I didn't know that I would specialize in leadership and negotiation and advocacy, but I grew by staying open and then claiming whatever felt right. I just call myself a leadership and negotiation coach. And it's been like that for years. And then I decided within a year of this business that I solely want to coach women of color. And then at some point, people kept coming to me for speaking gigs, workshop facilitation, custom bespoke corporate programs. And it just kept growing. And I'm actually right now growing through a season of, again, asking myself 6 years later, running this Real You leadership business, saying, what else do I want now? What's next? How do I want to lead this life?
So good. And I think that question of continuing to ask ourselves, what is it that we want, is such a good segue into this piece around talking about negotiation, right? Because I agree with you. It's just because you can doesn't mean you should. I wrote that down when you said that, because that's what this is about. And I've been wanting to talk about this because, like you shared, we go with the flow. As we get more visible, we get these increasingly complicated collaborations. We get these invites onto larger paid stages. We get these opportunities to work with larger corporate clients. And oftentimes, I'll just speak for myself. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but oftentimes I will forget, or I won't even realize. I'll just be going with the flow, right? I'm a Pisces. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, let's do that. And I'll be talking to a friend later on, or maybe my husband or whoever, and they'll ask something like, well, did you ask for more? And I'll be like, what do you mean? I didn't know I could do that. And so before we get into any tips or tactics or tricks, because I do want to talk about that too. First of all, is that it sounds like that's common, but why do you think that we are this way? What is the root cause of that?
I think that as women, as BIPOC folks, which I center my work around BIPOC women and femmes of color, I think that as marginalized people, we inherited a lot of habits and behaviors and mindsets and strategies to protect ourselves from rejection, from being told we're not good enough, from being told that we're not moral or that we're greedy or that we're selfish. We are taught to people please. We are taught to keep out of the spotlight as a part of survival, for better or for worse. And we're taught to take what we can get, right? And part of that is because people down our line in our lineage, in our circle, even today, we have seen that rejection from our parents. We have seen their rejections that they've also collected, and it scares us. So even if many of us didn't experience that ourselves, we witnessed it to the point that it scared the crap out of us, and we decided that ain't going to be me, right? So let me just stay put. Or we were taught the programming to prove ourselves first, to get our foot in the door, to get X amount of experience, to be able to claim our rates, to be able to claim what the value of our work and our expertise is. And straight up, so many of my clients were told when they got their first even 9-to-5 offer or their first contract gig that their parents or some adult figure in their lives that they trusted, that guided them, that taught them everything they knew, said, ooh, do not negotiate. Just take it. That's more than what we're making. That's more than what we made at your age. Take it. Don't be foolish. Don't lose it. Don't get it rescinded. So there's so many things, past, present, potentially future, that could influence our inability to advocate for ourselves or influence us to not activate our voice.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. Thank you for framing it in that way. I too am a fellow daughter of immigrants, of South Asian immigrants. And like you shared, I very much saw their sacrifice, like more than anything else. I saw their sacrifice and the values that they carry of like stability, of humility. And so for asking for more often just didn't come up as a thing at all. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
even have one client I just got off a session with yesterday. She herself is an immigrant from Africa, and we were talking about preparing for her performance review. So she is in a 9 to 5, she's in tech, and we're talking about getting sponsors versus mentors, champions that speak your
Mm.
name and tap on your shoulder and help advocate for you in a way you can't, who have positional power in an incredible amount of ways to influence the trajectory of your growth. And this person has spoken nothing but good about her. And yet, when we talked about how are you going to ask for him to put in a good performance review for you, she froze and said, "Oh, am I even allowed to tell him that I want a promotion, that I want
Mm.
more? Is that okay?" And I was like, "Girl, how will he know?"
Right.
So there is literally for us, no one, if no one taught you any differently, how would you actually know what's okay and what's not okay in the business world?
And I hope that's so beautiful. I hope that eliminates any potential shame or any potential negative feelings that are coming up because yeah, how would we know? But now we get to see examples of this in action. So another identity that I carry, this might sound silly, but I'm really proud of this identity. And it's that I'm a softie. Like I'm just a softie. Like I'm a
Mhm.
soft, tender-hearted, I'm like the embodiment of just a fuzzy blanket. And I love that about myself. But when I think about negotiation, sometimes like the idea that comes into mind is like banging on a table and like being the loudest person in the room. And so I would love to know, especially for other powerful, impactful softies who are maybe new to negotiating for themselves, like how can we use our unique capacity for listening, for caring, for empathy, for our sensitivity? How can we use that in our negotiations?
Yeah, I love that you frame it this way. And I know that when you reached out to me, you said that this was something that was a highly sought after topic for negotiation for soft BBs, right?
Yeah.
I myself am also very sensitive. I'm very, yes, I'm courageous. Yes, I take risks, and yet I still struggle, right? So normalizing your softness, normalizing the very human defense mechanisms and emotions that will come through, like people pleasing, fawning, freezing,
Mm.
avoiding, ruminating, over processing, spiraling, all of that is real. Even getting angry is real because our pay gaps, regardless if you're a business owner or a 9 to 5, are huge as women and femmes of color. And that is not because we cannot advocate, that's because of the systems that are there. So I also normalize that, hey, it's not your fault that no one ever taught you how to negotiate. And it's not your fault that you even have to be in a position to negotiate to get an equitable rate, to get the best pay possible in this engagement. Right. And so really taking out the shame of not knowing, really taking out the shame of feeling big feelings. Definitely, even if you're in an anger mode, which we have a lot to be angry about when
Yeah.
there's so much here to say that that doesn't help you in a negotiations. We need to be aware of our activations and we need to be aware of other people's activations that are on the other side of the negotiating table. But what I would say is enhance your superpowers. Actually, the way I teach negotiations is to be wildly curious and wildly empathetic and to be able to understand what their needs are, what their limitations are. But if they don't come correct and come through with that clearly, it's your job to use that empathy to ask for clarity. It's your job to use that empathy to build co empathy for you too, and to say, hey, we both want a win win here. What's it going to take for us to both feel good about this? So, what I suggest for anybody who thinks this is a win lose situation, make sure you know it doesn't have to be, and it's not. I think that's what scares us, that someone's got to lose. But negotiations do often start at no. And then you get to stay curious and open and continue a conversation by saying, well, what would make it a yes? So that you can collect that information, or saying, when could it be a no? When could that no turn into a yes? And so that's really what we want, to keep pushing ourselves and to use that sensitivity and our investigative skills. Because I know those of us who are very sensitive, we're constantly gauging things, constantly collecting clues and data. And so use that for the good and collect the information you need. What would it take for you to increase your budget?
Mm, mm. I love that. I love that. I would love to ask you about a couple of scenarios that many of us, as a lot of folks who listen to this, are coaches, consultants, service providers, maybe nonprofit leaders. And so I'd love to ask you a couple of scenarios that we oftentimes find ourselves in. And I'd love to ask you, how can we start to begin that piece of asking for clarity, staying curious? What would make it a yes? Is that okay? Can I ask you about
Yeah,
a couple of
yeah,
those? Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. So this one comes up a lot. So let's say that there's a big industry conference that you really want to speak at, but they don't pay their speakers. You're fairly confident that if you go, you can probably get business from this gig. So you want to go, but the plane tickets, the hotel costs, the food, it's starting to add up. It's feeling a little painful. What are some negotiation tactics, or what is like maybe a lead into a conversation to negotiate with the conference organizers to get more of what you need to feel comfortable in going?
So, first, you got to ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. So, don't stop yourself from saying, what else can you do? I was invited to a conference a couple years back, or actually a few years back, but they didn't want to pay for anything at all. And what I kept asking them, especially as a woman of color, saying, hey, for me, I have the benefit of being a negotiation coach as part of my title. So I get to be a little cheeky, and don't be afraid to be cheeky. And I get to be a little cheeky and say, hey, as a woman of color that cares about equity and getting paid fairly for labor, and as a negotiation coach, I can't help but ask, what else can you do? Can you pay for my parking? Can you pay for my gas? And they actually did, at least that, right? And just seeing what else is possible. So I would definitely suggest keep it open ended and say, here's what I want. Here's why. Here's the impact it might have negatively on me if you don't. What else is possible? How much time can I get? What can I do to share my pitch? What resources can I share? Can I speak on other panels while I'm there? What other opportunities are there to network? Is there going to be a speaker lounge? How long can I be in there? What access do I get? How about getting another ticket for my team member? There's so much that we can ask to see what's there. As far as compensation goes, I know conferences are really hard. That's a tough one, if I'm being very honest and candid. Unless you are the keynote speaker of the day, it's hard to get actual pay. But I would definitely be curious about what else is possible to get this in.
Two things came up for me. Well, first of all, those were such creative ideas. I love that. Thank you for that. Also, lost my train of thought. I had another thought. I had so many thoughts. My brain's ping, 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 ping. Oh, I remember. So many of us are used to being facilitators of change. Maybe we're fundraisers in a past life. Maybe we come from the nonprofit world. Maybe we're volunteers. We're so used to asking for others and asking for a mission outside of ourselves, but we are so uncomfortable asking on our own behalf, asking for ourselves. And so that's what came up for me in this moment. Like, we do deserve to be equitably paid and poured into. So that's so good. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were talking, I just thought of other things for conferences. Can you get highlighted in their newsletter? Can you get highlighted on different parts of their event page? How else can they basically maximize the marketing of you and the work that you do so that this feels more like an equal energy exchange?
Yes, so good. And if you, like you said, if you don't ask, you won't receive. So
Mhm.
ask. Okay, I've got another scenario for you. So what if we've realized, okay, we've said a verbal yes to this opportunity. Now, it could be a speaking gig. It could be a book deal that's in the works. It could be, this actually scenario could even apply to somebody in a full-time job who through conversations with our peers, we realize that someone else is getting paid significantly more for the same thing for doing what seems to be the same amount of work, right? Maybe it's a salary, maybe it's a book deal, who knows, but something like that.
Yeah.
So what then? Like, how do we navigate that uncomfy conversation?
Yeah. So I think this has happened to me in a 9 to 5 in a past life years ago, where I found out that I was getting underpaid more than $20,000 than my white male counterpart, who I helped hire onto the team and advocated for. And so, first of all, take care of your heart, take care of yourself, because you're going to have a lot of big feelings around it. It's going to hurt. And know again that coming in with resentment, coming in with anger, full on, without any restrictions, unfiltered, will not serve you, right? Because you might get hyper defensiveness back. You might activate someone else's defense mechanisms. And so we need to come through with curiosity and we need to make a plan, right? So I was able to close that gap, but at the same time, I was just catching up, and it was planting seeds saying, hey, this performance review cycle is coming. I need to do this. If it is someone in the industry, say I found out that my homie got with the same exact corporate client a consulting facilitation workshop, and we actually had differences in rates, and I found out that I was less, I would absolutely ask my friend, are you okay with sharing that information with me or with them, or coming correct with me to advocate for pay equity here? Right. And if they don't feel comfortable coming together, because you shouldn't have to do that alone if your friend can act as an ally or champion y'all together. But for me, if I had to go about it myself, I would just come very directly, very clearly and say, hey, I heard that another speaker got this rate. I have this rate, and ask for clarity, that curiosity again. I want to make sure that we honor equity here, especially if that organization, which most organizations do, has a DEI statement, a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. In any negotiation, you want to find that common ground and say, hey, I know you value DEI. I know you value helping marginalized people. It's on your website. We can both agree this doesn't really match up with that. So what's possible to close this gap? What's possible to raise my rates properly? And what's possible to make sure that this is good across the whole board for everybody? So what we're doing in that scenario is creating safety by saying, I agree with you, because you have this statement here. And if they don't happen to have a DEI statement that you can lean on, that's just a classic move for me to do. You can absolutely say, we can both agree this doesn't feel good. We can both agree this isn't fair. And what can we do about this? And start that discussion.
100%. I really appreciate how you brought in the piece around like almost coalition building on the first angle, like bringing in somebody to be in a united front with you and create community around that. That is a really fabulous approach. And on the second piece, yes, like you're giving people an opportunity to operationalize their values, the values they say they have, and it could be like a win-win. So I love that. I love that.
The way I see it is, this is beyond me at this point. Of course, I want my rate, and it's really not about me. It's about the system and the value system that you are presenting to me. And I'm going to call it all in, and I'm going to be curious, and I'm going to invite you to collaborate with me. So that's what we're constantly doing, because I can't raise my rate and your budget on my own. I need you on my side. So I'm going to state what's here and how this is beyond me and you. This is about doing the right thing.
Yes. Yes. And as a softie, like as a change maker, as a soft change maker, it makes me really happy knowing that that conversation will change, will create systems level change. So the next group of folks coming in will have a different experience. That feels really good, knowing that my negotiation can lead to that.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, hopefully.
It's possible. It's possible. I've seen whole teams advocate for the entire team to get to pay equity, which is really nice, right? So it's not impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about asking what is possible, like you said. Okay, I have one more scenario for you. And so, what about if it's not necessarily a money issue, but a vision or values issue? And we started talking about this in the previous one. But let's say, like, I'm thinking about some of the consultants I'm friends with and work with. And so, let's say you're part of a collaboration. Like maybe it's a large summit, or maybe it's a paid offer that you're doing with a couple of other folks. And you're picking up on signals that others you're in collaboration with are not necessarily values aligned, or they don't share the same vision. Like one example I can think of right off the bat is like around the level of diversity in the speakers that you're bringing in. You don't agree on that.
Mhm.
Can you guide us through some conversation starters?
Yeah. So for me, this has happened to me where I have said no from a couple opportunities that just didn't align because I was the only brown face there and they did not handle my call in very well. And it wasn't a paid situation anyway. So I just said, thank you, goodbye. But I've seen this in so many ways. Say if it's a diversity concern, you're about to be on a panel or in a summit, you can email them saying, hey, again, especially if they have a DEI statement, let's talk through this. Or I have had peers as well that have firm boundaries, very clear needs saying if the speaker roster does not have at least 50% BIPOC community members, I am not attending this. So be really clear on what your non-negotiables are, essentially, is what it comes down to. And be very unapologetic about stating that, saying, hey, I would love to attend this. And this is the standard. Otherwise, I feel like I'm being very tokenized, or I feel like I'm being in a silo situation that I can't speak for the majority of the community, etc. Or absolutely ask again, what do you think about that? What are you going to do about that? This has even happened. I was just coaching a client who's trying to make a move into a sister team, basically, in her existing organization. And she's really concerned because the leadership of that of that specific team, even if they work so closely together, is majority white. And they saw in the past year every single BIPOC employee leave that team.
Mm.
So they have all these concerns and they're so worried and they don't want to offend them because they still know this is a great opportunity and they want to go through with the interviewing process because they could essentially be a shoo-in to get this role. And I said, you don't need to say, hey, what's wrong with you? And put them on the defense. Hey, what went down? You need to ask them, what is your commitment to changing things for the better? Because you're interviewing them back. You're seeing if this is a good fit back. And so you need to at least understand, do you align with their commitment moving forward too? Of what are you going to do to improve things? Because if I join this team, I'm going to expect you to improve things. Right. So it can go either way. And I've worked in my own consultancy gigs where what I do is I say things up front now, because little by little, even paid gigs to do inclusive leadership talks or inclusive leadership programming that I do for people managers and majority people managers in organizations, which are folks who don't look like us a lot of times. I have to be very clear on my standards, the language I will be using, that I will be talking about systemic oppression, and it needs to be okay. And a lot of folks center whiteness, a lot of folks center comfort of men, a lot of folks say, oh, we need baby steps, etc. And so we have to really have an ongoing conversation of what I will and won't do. And I need to know what I'm clear on, that I need you to know that I do this. Or if you bring me in for a negotiation workshops for your BIPOC employee resource groups or your affinity groups, which are very popular for me, or your women's groups, I need you to know that I'm going to be telling them about systemic oppression, about managing up. And I also need to know, what are you doing to prepare your people managers for all of their marginalized team members to suddenly say, I want more. I'm setting boundaries. This is not good enough, because it can't just be on them. There's a whole ecosystem that you need to focus on, because if I'm empowering your team members and it stops at your managers not being inclusive and equitable and not being able to embrace that and stay open and curious to that, then this isn't going to work. I started saying that up front. I learned very fast that I needed that to be, and no money was worth putting basically the people that I coach at risk.
Yes. Yes. And that's a non-negotiable. I love that. So you have equipped us with some really wonderful language and some really helpful ways to think about this. And yet, when I think about myself in some of these scenarios as I go into them, my friend, Dr. Keisha Harris, calls this sometimes like relationships tilted by power. So I'm thinking about like a fundraiser talking to a donor. I'm thinking about a consultant talking to a long-term like retainer client. I'm thinking about all these different things. We might have the language ready in our mind. We might have the fill in the blank ready in our mind. But when we go in, our body starts to react in a different way, or in a way that we've been conditioned to. And I would love to hear your take on what can we do to prepare ourselves mentally, but also like in our body to go into these conversations.
Yeah. One, you gotta up your self-care game by times 100. Seriously, because showing up in completely new ways, doing something that goes against every internal activation and defense mechanism and programming in you is not easy. And so I say, prepare your self-care practice, your centering or grounding practice before, have something for during, have something for after. So for me, before I have a really big conversation, sending a proposal, getting the update for it, going through back and forth on statement of work pieces, I will absolutely always light some beautiful sage or guava leaf or something, light a candle. I might pull a card. I might center on something. I might say a bunch of affirmations to myself. Sometimes I run around my house, and if my husband is home, I will put my arms up and say, I can do this. I can do this. Tell me I can do this. And he'll say, you can do this. And you got to hype yourself up and say why you absolutely can do this, why you absolutely unquestionably are the right person for this, and claim that. And underneath, especially if it's a Zoom conversation or video conversation, I'm constantly touching my fingers and counting fingers, or like I'm constantly rubbing the ridges of my fingers together to just ground and just wait and pause, because power of the pause in a negotiation is very important. Some of my clients will have a little toy car or something on their desk to just move it back and forth and back and forth, to just be present with yourself in that moment. And then I always say, have a care plan, or I call it, a lot of my clients call it care plans, but I call it restorative leadership plan. Something to restore you and celebrate yourself after, regardless of the outcome. Right. So to be able to say, I'm celebrating myself even 1% because I did this freaking really hard thing, and that deserves to be celebrated. And to be honest with yourself about the power dynamics in the room, since you did mention the power dynamics, that of course you would feel different. I feel completely different when I enter a room full of my clients, BIPOC women and femmes, versus entering a room of majority power in an organization, which are typically white, male-centered spaces. All of my work trauma comes out. All of my inner haters and fears come out. All of my imposter comes out to play all of a sudden. No matter how good I am at self-managing that, they will always activate when I sense danger because, oh, the power dynamics just shifted. I am absolutely scared, right? I'm scared of judgment. I feel vulnerable. I feel this versus I feel safe to be vulnerable. I feel safe to be myself. And I still want to lead through in those scenarios as me. So I pull all the stops as many times as I have to. After a workshop, I'll spiral if it's a people manager workshop and I got all these blank stares at me and I'm not sure how it went. And it always goes well, but my mind will say something very different. And so I will oftentimes jump on my bike and bike really hard for 10 minutes or lay on my back and do deep breathing on the floor because I just know that my brain is trying to tell me all the things that it could have done better and all the things that might have not been good enough for it to be quote unquote worth all that money because I charge, I claim my rate. And so I have to take care of my heart and I have to take care of my mind. And if you know that about you, be prepared and prepare your scripts, prepare your objection handling scripts. That's such a great way to just practice the actual voice muscles of saying your rate, saying, no, that's not good enough, saying those open ended questions like what's possible. Whatever your worst case scenario is, write it down and say, I'm scared they're going to say this. So then write down what you will literally say in your own words and practice it. That always helps me too.
Yes, that's so good. You have really just opened my mind from the ritual aspect of it to the releasing the energy that's in our body by biking. For me, I'd probably try to run as fast as I can just to get the heebie-jeebies out.
Yeah, some folks do it even before, right?
Yeah.
For this negotiation conversation, I went for a run, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you amplified the piece around celebrating no matter what the outcome is, because celebrating that you are being brave and being in the process is huge. That's
It
huge.
is huge, especially if you've never done it before. It's such a big deal and it deserves to be celebrated.
Yes, it does. It does. Oh, I could talk to you forever. But as we start to wrap up a little bit, I have a typical soft Pisces dreamy question for you. And that would be, tell me about your vision for the future. What is the world that you are trying to build? Tell me about that.
The world I'm trying to build for myself, always as soft as I can go, as slow as I can go. I would love a world full of diverse leaders of all different intersectional identities, taking up all the space, not being gaslit, not being told they're not good enough, not being told they don't belong, but rather always having a place to safely be themselves emotionally, psychologically, physically. And I envision a world where everybody just can be their real selves, say what's really on their mind, understand their impact, make conscious, intentional decisions that center their wellness, and for that to be okay. And to know that what is good for you is also good for the collective and the collective to understand that. I envision a world where boundaries are just a norm and that's okay. Hopefully, a world where nobody even has to negotiate. We are all able to get what we need to nourish ourselves and thrive in this world and in this life. And I envision a world where I get to constantly let go of any sort of programming around urgency or quote unquote productivity being the center of our world and identity. And I really do just hope that everybody finds pockets of that as many times in their daily life as possible.
And what strikes me and what's so beautiful about that is your work around negotiation is very much helping to create that world, because negotiation is a tool for change. It's a tool for systems level change. So I applaud you. I applaud you. How can the good people listening find you? How can they get in touch with you? Where are you?
Oh, good people. You can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, which is how we met, right? So Nadia De Ala there, same thing on Instagram. I'm on both fairly actively. And then you can find me and my work at Real You Leadership. That's REAL, like keep it real. and you, the most important person in your life, which is you, YOU, and leadership.com. And you can find all of my one-on-one coaching work for BIPOC women and femmes there, my speaking and facilitation work there, and other free resources that we have there for you to learn how to lead and negotiate more authentically.
Perfect. And of course, we're going to link that all in the show notes so that we can make it as easy peasy as possible to get in touch. Nadia, thank you again. This was so enlightening. And I know that it is going to help touch some folks and help people have some good conversations.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate such an authentic and just soft conversation. This was really, really warming.
Oh, I love hearing that. Okay, so you've heard from us. Now I want to hear from you. Leaving a review helps us so much in growing our reach and supporting more folks with this podcast. And even better, I would love for you to send me a note on LinkedIn with your takeaways from this episode. I cherish and respond to every message, so I can't wait to hear from you. And if you want to go even deeper, check out the show notes to take your next step.